A pickup truck sputtered along the slick highway, its headlights cutting through sheets of relentless rain like feeble knives in the dark. It was one of those nights where the world seemed to conspire against you, the kind where every drop from the sky felt like a personal accusation. Mark Thompson gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the worn leather. He was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeped into your soul after pulling a 16-hour shift at the warehouse. Boxes stacked, forklifts maneuvered, endless beeps from scanners, all for a paycheck that barely covered the rent and the mounting legal fees. In 3 weeks, it would all come crashing down. The trial date loomed like a guillotine, circled in angry red on the faded calendar in his cramped kitchen. Accused of embezzling $52,000 from his former employer, Evergreen Logistics. Mark knew he was innocent. But the evidence, forged receipts, manipulated ledgers, emails that looked damning, pointed straight at him. His boss, Victor Hale, had orchestrated all to cover his own tracks, his gambling debt spiraling out of control. Victor had the slick lawyers, the connections in high places. Mark? He had an overworked public defender named Elena Vasquez, who believed him but warned that belief alone wouldn't sway a jury. If convicted, 5 years minimum. 5 years stolen from his life, from his son, Tommy. The boy was only 7, with a mop of curly hair and eyes that lit up like Christmas lights when Mark read him bedtime stories. Who would teach him to ride a bike without training wheels? Who would explain why Dad vanished, leaving him in the cold grip of foster care? Mark's wife, Sarah, had died 2 years ago in a car accident, a drunk driver crossing lanes on a night much like this one. She left behind a void that Mark filled with sheer willpower, juggling fatherhood and survival. But now, this accusation threatened to rip it all away. The rain pounded harder, the wipers struggling to keep up. Mark's mind raced, replaying Elena's words. The evidence is stacked against us, Mark. We need a miracle. A miracle? As if those happened to guys like him, blue collar, single dad, scraping by in a Boston suburb. He blinked away the fatigue, focusing on the road ahead. Then, through the blur, he saw it. A sleek black SUV pulled over on the shoulder of the Mystic River Parkway, hazard lights flashing weakly like a distress signal in the storm. A figure stood beside it, huddled against the wind, phone pressed to their ear. Mark's first instinct was to drive on. He had every reason. His own storm raging inside, the late hour, the risk of stopping for a stranger. Keep going, he muttered to himself. She's probably got AAA on speed dial. Look at that car. Fancy, expensive. She's fine. But as he drew closer, he saw her more clearly. A woman in a tailored coat, now drenched, her posture screaming desperation. Shoulders slumped, free hand waving futilely at passing cars that sped by without a glance. Something twisted in Mark's gut. His late mother's voice echoed in his head. Clear as the day she said it before cancer claimed her. Character shows when no one's looking, son. Help where you can, even if it costs you. She had raised him alone after his father bailed, instilling that unyielding sense of decency. Mark sighed, flicking on his blinker. He pulled over behind the SUV. The rain assaulting him the moment he opened the door, soaked in seconds. He approached slowly, hands visible to avoid startling her. "Ma'am, you okay? Car trouble?" She turned, eyes wide with a mix of relief and caution. Even in the downpour, Mark noted her poise, sharp features, confident stance, like someone used command. "It just died," she shouted over the roar. "Won't start. I've called for help, but they're backed up hours in this weather. Mind if I take a look? I'm no mechanic, but I've tinkered with engines enough to keep my old truck running." He gestured to his battered pickup. She hesitated, sizing him up, then nodded. "Please, I'd appreciate it." Under the hood, rain streaming down his back, Mark inspected the battery, wires, connections. His fingers, calloused from years of labor, found the issue quickly. A corroded cable, loosened by the vibrations of the road. "Loose negative terminal," he called out. "Got tools in my truck. Hang on." He dashed back, grabbing his weathered toolbox, a relic from his landscaping days before the warehouse. As he worked, scraping corrosion and tightening the clamp, he chatted to ease the tension. the way he did with Tommy during thunderstorms. This model's prone to this in bad weather. You might want a new battery soon. There's an auto shop 5 miles up, decent prices. She watched him, rain matting her hair. You're getting soaked. I can't thank you enough. No big deal, Mark replied. Standing as a connection click secure. Try starting it now. She slipped into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine purred to life. Her face broke into a genuine smile, tension melting away. It works. How can I repay you? Cash? Coffee? Mark waved it off, water dripping from his brow. Just pay it forward someday. Glad to help. He turned to leave, but she called out, At least your name? So I know who to thank properly. Mark, he said, too weary for pretense. Mark Thompson. Thank you, Mark Thompson. You might have saved my evening. Her voice held a warmth that cut through the chill. He nodded, climbing back into his truck, watching her taillights fade into the night. A small act, forgotten by morning, or so he thought. Little did he know, that rainy roadside would rewrite his fate. 3 weeks later, Mark sat in the Norfolk County Courthouse, in an ill-fitting suit borrowed from a neighbor. His heart thundered, palms slick with sweat. This was it, the hearing that could seal his doom. Elena sat beside him, reviewing notes. Stay calm, Mark. We'll fight this. All rise for the Honorable Judge Victoria Hale. The bailiff intoned. Mark stood on shaky legs, eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't bear to look at the arbiter of his future. But as the judge entered, robe flowing, something nagged at him. He glanced up and froze. The face, the eyes, the authoritative presence. It was her, the woman from the rain. His mind reeled. No, impossible. The lighting was different, the setting worlds apart. But the more he stared, the surer he became. Judge Victoria Hale. The name clicked. Victor Hale's estranged sister? No relation. Surely a coincidence. But those eyes... She took her seat, scanning the room with impartiality. If she recognized him, she showed no sign. Mark's pulse raced. Had fate delivered his miracle or a cruel twist? The proceedings began. The prosecutor, sharp and aggressive, presented the evidence. Documents, timelines, all fabricated but convincing. Elena countered, highlighting inconsistencies, requesting forensic analysis of the originals, something prior judges had denied as unnecessary expense. Judge Hale leaned forward, her gaze piercing. These are copies, Mr. Proctor. We're the originals. Mark's breath caught. Her voice, unmistakable. They're sufficient, Your Honor, the prosecutor replied. Not in my court, she said firmly. I order a full forensic review. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. The gavel struck. Whispers filled the room. Elena gripped Mark's arm. This is huge. She's giving us a shot. But Mark barely heard. His eyes locked on Judge Hale as she exited. Was it her? And if so, why risk it? Victoria Hale closed the door to her chambers with a soft click, her composed facade cracking the moment she was alone. Her hand lingered on the doorknob, steadying herself as her mind raced. Mark Thompson. The name had jumped out at her when she reviewed the case file 2 days ago, but seeing him in person, sitting there in the defendant's chair, eyes hollow with desperation, confirmed it. He was a man from the rainy night, the one who had stopped without hesitation, fixed her car with steady hands, and vanished into the storm without asking for anything in return. She sank into her chair, the weight of her decision pressing down. By not recusing herself, she had violated protocol. Judges were supposed to disclose any prior contact with parties involved, no matter how brief. But as she stepped aside, the case would land with Judge Harlan Brooks, known for his harsh sentencing and disdain for underfunded defenses. Brooks would see the evidence at face value. Convict Mark. Send him away for years. Victoria couldn't let that happen, not after reading the file, spotting the glaring holes. No originals, digital timestamps that didn't align, a motive that reeked the setup. 3 years on the bench, and before that, 8 as a district attorney. Victoria had climbed the ranks in a male-dominated field, earning a reputation for fairness laced with unyielding logic. She believed in the system, flawed as it was. But she also knew its blind spots, how it favored the powerful, how innocence could be buried under procedural laziness. Mark's file screamed injustice. A single father, widowed, working menial jobs to support his son. No priors, glowing character references from neighbors and co-workers. And Victor Hale, the accuser? Her research, discreet, off the record, uncovered his shady dealings. Offshore accounts, whispers of fraud in other companies. But it was more than facts. That night on the parkway, stranded and vulnerable, Victoria had felt fear, real, primal. Cars whizzed by, indifferent. Then Mark appeared, respectful, capable. He didn't leer, didn't demand. Just helped. In a world where she judged motives daily, his act stood out as pure. She couldn't ignore that. If she recused, Mark would lose everything. So she stayed, ordering the forensic review to buy time, to force the truth out. Ethics be damned, she thought, rubbing her temples. Sometimes justice required bending the frame to fit the picture. Back home that evening, Mark paced his tiny apartment. Tommy's laughter from the living room a stark contrast to the storm in his mind. The boy was building a fort from couch cushions, oblivious to the chaos. Dad, look, it's a castle for knights. Mark forced a smile, kneeling beside him. Awesome, buddy. Who's the king? You are. Tommy beamed, hugging him fiercely. Mark's throat tightened. If he went away, who would build forts? Sarah's parents were gone, his own family distant. Foster care loomed like a monster under the bed. He tucked Tommy in later, reading Where the Wild Things Are for the umpteenth time, his voice cracking on the lines about returning home. Sleep evaded him. Was it really her? Judge Hale, poised, authoritative. The woman in the rain had been grateful, human, but the voice, the eyes, coincidence or destiny? He replayed the hearing. Her insistence on originals, the way she dismantled the prosecutor's complacency. Elena had called a win, but Mark wondered if it was more. The next 2 weeks dragged like eternity. Mark worked overtime, stashing every penny for potential appeals. Tommy sensed the tension, asking, Dad, why are you sad? Is it the bad man at work? Mark hugged him. Just grown-up stuff. Kiddo, we'll be okay. But nightmares plagued him. Handcuffs clicking, Tommy's cries echoing as he's led away. On the 10th night, Tommy woke screaming from his own bad dream. They took you, Dad. Don't go. Mark held him, rocking gently. I'm here, Tommy. Always. Elena's call came on day 13. Mark, the forensics report is in. It's a game changer. Hale fabricated it all. Timestamps doctored, signatures forged. Bank logs prove it. We're back in court tomorrow. Mark's world tilted. Relief flooded him, mixed with questions. Judge Hale, had she known? The courtroom buzzed the next day. Reporters sensing a twist. Victor Hale sat stone-faced, his lawyers fidgeting. Mark took his seat, eyes on the bench. All rise. Judge Hale entered, her gaze sweeping the room. For a split second, it lingered on Mark. Acknowledgement or imagination? She dove in, dissecting the report. The evidence presented by the prosecution is fraudulent. Digital forensics confirm manipulation by the accuser, Victor Hale. All charges against Mark Thompson are dismissed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark's vision blurred with tears. Free. He was free. Furthermore, Judge Hale continued, I recommend charges against Mr. Hale for perjury, fraud, and obstruction. The gavel fell. Chaos erupted. Flashes from cameras, murmurs. Elena slapped Mark's back. You did it. But Mark stared at the bench. As Judge Hale rose, their eyes met briefly. Confirmation. It was her. She had known, had fought for him. She exited swiftly, leaving Mark with gratitude swelling in his chest. How to thank her? Protocol forbade contact. That afternoon, picking Tommy up from daycare, Mark scooped him into a bear hug. Big news, buddy. Dad's okay. We're okay. Tommy tilted his head. The magic lady helped? Like in stories? Mark chuckled, tears pricking. Yeah, something like that. Life normalized over the following weeks. Mark landed a better job at a local hardware store, Steady hours, benefits. He cooked dinners, helped with homework, watched Tommy soccer games. The apartment felt warmer, drawings covering the fridge. Dad, the hero, rainbows arching over stick-figure families. Yet, the unanswered question nagged. He needed closure. One crisp afternoon, stocking shelves in the electrical aisle, a voice behind him. "Excuse me, do you carry battery cables?" Mark turned, and there she was, Judge Hale, in casual attire, a tentative smile. "You," he whispered, a wrench clattering to the floor. "Mark Thompson," she said softly. "I hoped I'd find you here. Your file mentioned the job change." He blinked. "It was you. In court, you knew." She nodded. "The moment I saw your name," but admitting it meant recusing. "And the next judge would have convicted me," Mark finished. "You risked everything." "Justice demanded it," she replied. "Your kindness that night, it told me who you were, not a thief." They talked amid tools and wires, the store fading. "Why me?" Mark asked. "Because in that rain, you reminded me why I became a judge, to protect the good ones." Gratitude overwhelmed him. "You saved us, Tommy and me." "You saved me first," she countered. Stranded, scared. "You stopped." A pause. "Coffee? To talk more." Mark smiled. "I like that." Their first coffee stretched into hours. Victoria shared her story. Divorced young, no kids, poured into career. Mark opened up about Sarah, Tommy's antics. By the second meeting, Tommy joined. "You're the car lady?" he asked, wide-eyed. Victoria laughed. "Guilty." Tommy showed drawings, judges with capes, magic gavels. "You fixed Dad." She hugged him. "He fixed me, too." Dates followed, zoo trips, picnics. Hands brushed, then held. "For safety," Tommy giggled, echoing Susan's line in spirit. Victoria fit seamlessly. She taught Tommy chess, helped Mark navigate post-trial paperwork. Love bloomed quietly, profoundly. Months later, proposal at the park. Tommy helped, spilling the secret. Victoria said yes, tears flowing. The wedding, spring blooms, laughter. Tommy ring bearer, hopping down the aisle. Vows promised kindness, justice, family. Victor served time, justice circled back. In the end, a rainy act sparked a lifetime. Kindness, indeed, returns. Victoria Hale stared at the case file on her desk, the fluorescent light of her chambers casting long shadows across the pages. Mark Thompson's photo gazed back at her. Tired eyes, a man worn by life's relentless grind. She had known it was him the instant she opened the dossier, but confirming it in court had sent a jolt through her system. Protocol screamed for recusal. Any prior interaction, even fleeting, demanded she step aside. Yet here she was, gavel in hand, steering the case toward truth. Why? Because the system she served was riddled with cracks, and Mark was slipping through one. As a prosecutor, she'd seen innocence railroaded, poor defense, biased judges, evidence unchallenged. Now, as judge, she vowed to plug those gaps. Mark's file reeked of fabrication. Victor Hale's accusations too neat, the documents suspiciously pristine copies. Forensics would expose it, but only if ordered. And Judge Brooks, the likely replacement? He'd dismiss the request, slam the book shut. 5 years for Mark, a child orphan in all but name. Victoria's own life echoed his solitude. Divorced at 32 after a marriage eroded by her career's demands. No kids, just an echoing brownstone in Back Bay. Friends urged dating, but who had time? Judging required attachment. Yet that rainy night pierced her armor. Mark's kindness wasn't calculated. It was instinctual. In a cynical world, it restored her faith. She couldn't abandon him now. But risks loomed. If discovered, disbarment, scandal. She paced, weighing ethics against equity. Justice wasn't blind. It favored the prepared. She'd bend, not break, the rules to even the scales. Meanwhile, Mark navigated his days in a haze. The forensic delay was a lifeline, but uncertainty gnawed. At work, he stocked shelves mechanically, mind replaying the judge's face. Victoria Hale, researched online, her bio confirmed. Stern but fair, a rising star. No mention of stranded cars. Of course. Was his memory playing tricks? Desperation birthed illusions. Tommy's innocence amplified the ache. Dad, can we get pizza tonight? The boy asked, kicking a ball in their cramped yard. Sure, champ. Mark ruffled his hair, hiding turmoil. Bedtime stories became lifelines, Tommy snuggling close. Will the monsters come? Tommy whispered one night. No monsters went against us, Mark assured, though his own loomed large. Elena's updates were sparse. Forensics underway. Hang tight. Nights blurred into worry. Visions of prison bars. Tommy's tear-streaked face. On day 8, a breakdown hit. Alone after tucking Tommy in, Mark crumpled, sobs racking him. Why me? He whispered to the ceiling. Sarah's photo on the nightstand offered no answers. He needed a sign, something to cling to. The call came midweek. Reports in. We're golden. Court tomorrow. The room hummed with anticipation. Victor fidgeted. Reporters scribbled. Judge Hale entered. Composure ironclad. Mark searched her eyes. No flicker. She dismantled the case methodically. Fraudulent evidence. Charges dismissed. Then, the hammer on Victor. Recommend prosecution. Freedom crashed over Mark like a wave. As she left, a shared glance. Gratitude met resolve. She had known. Post-trial, life rebooted. New job perks included weekends off. Tommy thrived. Yet, thanks unsaid weighed heavy. The hardware store encounter bridged it. Victoria's casual approach belied nerves. I couldn't let it go without saying, you changed my view that night. Mark, stunned, you saved my family. Conversation flowed. Her lonely climb, his widowed struggles. Coffee followed, Tommy's drawings charming her. Magic judge, he declared. Dates evolved. Parks, dinners. Hands intertwined naturally. Victoria fit. Teaching Tommy puzzles, sharing laughs with Mark. Proposal amid autumn leaves. Tommy assisting with glee. Yes, she cried. Wedding, intimate, joyous. Tommy's hops down the aisle sparked laughter. Vows pledged partnership, kindness. Victor's conviction closed the circle. A rainy act birthed a family. But deeper it taught mercy mends. Victoria's chambers felt confining post-ruling. She had gambled big. Now, aftermath. Colleagues whispered. Was her order too aggressive? She brushed it off, focusing on next cases. But Mark lingered in thoughts. His file revealed a life mirrored hers. Loss, resilience. Sarah's accident report, tucked in appendices, hit home. Victoria's own near-miss years ago. She visited her ex-husband's grave that weekend. A ritual for clarity. Did I do right? She murmured. Wind whispered affirmation. Mark's world brightened incrementally. Tommy's school conferences, soccer practices, normalcy savored. Yet, the judge's face haunted dreams, a beacon. Their meeting at the store was serendipitous. Words poured, gratitude, explanations. I broke rules, she admitted. For justice, he countered. Bond formed swiftly. Coffee dates revealed shared loves. Classic films, hiking, quiet evenings. Tommy adored her, dubbing her Aunt Vic initially. As romance sparked, challenges arose. Victoria's job demanded discretion. Public appearances risked scrutiny. They navigated carefully, building trust. By winter, integrated lives. Holidays together, Tommy's excitement palpable. Is she staying? He asked. Hope so, Mark smiled. Proposal. Lakeside, Tommy hiding poorly. Laughter, tears, yes. Wedding blended families. Her colleagues, his neighbors. Tommy's role, proud, energetic. In vows, echoes of rain. You stop for me, I'll stand by you. Life post, balance fulfilling. Victor's trial vindicated all. Kindness's ripple, profound. Victoria Hale stood at the tall window of her chambers overlooking the harbor, the late afternoon sun glinting off the water like scattered coins. The city below moved on, oblivious of the earthquake that had just occurred inside courtroom 7B. She had dismissed the charges against Mark Thompson, exposed Victor Hale as the architect of the fraud. and, in doing so, crossed every ethical line she had once sworn to defend. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass and exhaled. She had known it wasn't the moment the clerk slid the file across her desk 3 weeks earlier. The defendant's photo was grainy, but the eyes, tired, honest, stubborn, were unmistakable. She had opened the folder with trembling fingers, half hoping she was wrong. She wasn't. Mark Thompson, the man who had climbed out of a battered pickup in a biblical downpour, soaked to bone, and fixed her car with nothing more than a rusted multi-tool and quiet competence. The man who had refused money, refused even to linger long enough for her to ask his last name. She had sat there for 20 minutes that first day, staring at his booking photo, the weight of the conflict crushing her chest. Recuse. That was the rule. Recuse. And the case would go to Judge Harlan Brooks, a man who kept a framed photo of his golf handicap on his desk and a 96% conviction rate for indigent defendants. Brooks would glance at the photocopied ledger, shrug, and send Mark away for 5 to 7 years. Tommy Thompson, 7 years old, mother deceased, no other relatives, would become a ward of the state. Victoria had closed the file, locked her office door, and cried for the first time since a judicial swearing-in. She had spent the next 48 hours building a firewall around her conscience. She would not acknowledge him. She would not smile. She would give no hint. She would simply do what no one else had bothered to do: force the prosecution to produce original documents and order the forensic audit the prior judge had lazily denied. If anyone questioned her later, she would say the evidence was obviously deficient. She would lie. For the first time in her life, Victoria Hale prepared to lie under oath if necessary, and she had done it. The gavel had fallen like a guillotine on Victor Hale's lies, and Mark Thompson had walked out a free man. Now the silence in her chambers felt deafening. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She almost ignored it. "Hello." "Your Honor." A small, hesitant voice. It's Tommy Thompson. "My dad said I'm not supposed to call you, but I looked up the courthouse number, and I want to say thank you for giving my dad back." He smiles again. Real smiles. "So, thank you for the magic hammer." Victoria's knees buckled. She sank into her chair, tears spilling before she could stop them. "You're very welcome, Tommy," she managed, voice cracking. "Bye, Judge Lady." The line went dead. She cried harder than ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs, because a 7-year-old had just shattered every defense she had built. She had broken the law for them, and she would do it again in a heartbeat. Across town, Mark stood in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, staring blankly at boxes of Frosted Flakes, while Tommy danced around the cart, singing a made-up song about magic gavels and super dads. Free. The word still didn't feel real. He kept waiting to wake up in a holding cell. The last 6 months a cruel dream. But Tommy was here, warm and solid, tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we get the dinosaur oatmeal? Please." Mark laughed, an actual laugh, and tossed 2 boxes into the cart. That night he tucked Tommy in. The boy, clutching the stuffed Triceratops Victoria, had never known existed until now. "Dad," Tommy whispered in the dark, "do you think the judge lady has a little boy?" "I don't know, Bud. I hope she does. Or maybe she needs one. We have an extra bed." Mark's heart performed an awkward somersault. Go to sleep, matchmaker. Tommy giggled and was out in seconds. Mark stood in the hallway a long time, staring at Sarah's photo on the wall. "I think she'd like them," he whispered to the empty air. "Both of them." 2 weeks later, on a quiet Thursday, Victoria walked into Thompson's Hardware for the first time. She had rehearsed a dozen casual lines in her car, but the moment she saw him in aisle 9, reaching for a box of terminal connectors, every word evaporated. Mark turned. The box slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. They stared at each other across 10 feet of linoleum and fluorescent light. "You came," he said, voice rough. "I had to," she answered. He took one step, then another, until they were close enough for her to see the flecks of gold in his tired eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You already did," she replied. 3 weeks ago, in the rain. He shook his head. "That was nothing. You risked your entire career. I risked it for the man who stopped, she said simply. Turns out he was worth the risk. Tommy's voice suddenly echoed from the end of the aisle. Dad, they have the gummy dinosaurs on sale. Oh my gosh, hi, Judge Lady. He barreled toward them, slamming into Victoria's legs with a hug that nearly knocked her over. She knelt instinctively, arms wrapping around the small, fierce boy. Hi, Tommy. You came to our store. Dad said you might, but I didn't believe him because judges are busy, but you came. I did. Tommy pulled back, suddenly serious. Do you like dinosaur oatmeal? Victoria laughed, a real startled laugh. I have never tried it, but I have a feeling I'm about to love it. That night, the three of them sat in a corner booth at Marino's Pizzeria, Tommy between them, feet swinging, narrating an elaborate story involving a T-Rex, a magic gavel, a villain named Bad Victor, who got eaten by a friendly shark. Mark and Victoria's eyes kept meeting over Tommy's head, soft, wondering, terrified to hope. When Tommy finally ran out of steam and fell asleep against Mark's shoulder, Victoria reached across the table and covered Mark's hand with hers. I'm not very good at this, she whispered. At what? Being human, outside the robe. He turned his hand palm up, lacing their fingers. You're doing just fine. Outside, the city lights shimmered on wet pavement, left over from an earlier rain. Mark carried a sleeping Tommy to the truck. Victoria followed, heart pounding harder than it ever had in any courtroom. At her car, she paused. Coffee tomorrow? She asked. No robes, no gavels, just coffee. Mark smiled, small, stunned, perfect. Tomorrow, as she drove home, the radio played an old song about second chances. Victoria Hale, who had spent a decade believing justice was a cold, impartial machine, cried again, this time from something that felt dangerously like joy. The next morning, Victoria Hale did something she had not done in 8 years. She called in sick. Not actually sick, her clerk would have dropped dead from shock, but unavoidable personal matter. She stood in her walk-in closet in jeans and a soft gray sweater, hair loose the first time since law school, and realized she had no idea how to dress for hope. Mark had texted directions to a tiny cafe in South Boston called the Daily Grind. No relation to the chain, just a hole in the wall with mismatched chairs and the best blueberry muffins in the city. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered 2 coffees and a hot chocolate, just in case, then spent the next 9 minutes rearranging sugar packets like a nervous teenager. Mark walked in at 8:57 wearing a clean flannel shirt and the same shy half-smile from the rainy night. Tommy was not with him. Mrs. Delgado from downstairs had agreed to watch him for 2 hours. Hi, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to see a superior court judge waiting for him with trembling hands. Hi yourself, she answered, and slid the hot chocolate across the table. In case you have a 7-year-old accomplice hiding in your jacket. He laughed, deep surprise warm. He tried. I barely escaped. They talked for 3 hours. About everything and nothing. About Sarah's laugh and how Mark still reached for her side of the bed some nights. About Victoria's father, a retired cop who never quite understood why his daughter chose law school over the academy. About Tommy's obsession with paleontology and his current campaign to adopt a bearded dragon named Judge Scales. About the way the rain had sounded that night, like the sky was crying for both of them. When the barista started stacking chairs, Mark glanced at his watch and winced. Mrs. Delgado's shift ended at 11. Victoria stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her sweater. Walk me my car? Outside, the November air was sharp enough to pink their cheeks. They stopped beside her black SUV, new battery, courtesy of Mark's recommendation. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Mark said very quietly, I keep thinking I dreamed the last 6 weeks. Victoria stepped closer. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and realize I threw away my career for a hallucination. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Real enough, he asked. She answered by rising on her toes and kissing him. It was soft at first, tentative, almost reverent, then deeper, hungrier, like 2 people who had survived separate shipwrecks and suddenly found dry land in each other's arms. When they broke apart, foreheads still touching, Mark whispered, "Tommy's going to demand a full report." Victoria laughed against his mouth. "Tell him there were definitely fireworks." That afternoon, Tommy greeted her at the apartment like a tiny tornado in dinosaur pajamas. "Did you kiss my dad yet?" Victoria choked on air. Mark turned scarlet. Tommy rolled his eyes. "Adults are so slow. Mrs. Delgado said it was obvious." He grabbed Victoria's hand. "Come see my museum." The museum was a living room coffee table covered in plastic dinosaurs arranged in chronological order. Tommy narrated with deadly seriousness, while Mark made grilled cheese sandwiches shaped like stegosauruses. Victoria sat cross-legged on the rug, listening to a 7-year-old explain the Cretaceous period, and felt something inside her chest crack wide open. Later, when Tommy finally crashed on the couch mid-documentary, Mark draped a blanket over him and led Victoria to the tiny balcony. Boston skyline glittered in the distance. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, voice low. "Date. Be happy. Let someone in." Sarah was... "I know," Victoria said. "I'm terrified, too. My last relationship ended because I forgot how to be anything but Judge Hale." He took her hand. "Then we'll learn together. Slowly. One dinosaur oatmeal breakfast at a time." December arrived with snow and school plays and the smell of pine from the scraggly tree they decorated together. Victoria spent her first night, fully clothed, on the couch, watching Elf with a sleeping child sprawled across both of them. She woke at dawn to Mark making coffee, Tommy still snoring softly against her shoulder, and realized she had never felt more home. Christmas morning, Tommy tore open a box to reveal a small, official-looking gavel made of polished walnut, engraved on the side, "For Judge Vic, magic is real. Love, Tommy and Dad." Victoria cried so hard she had to hide in the bathroom until her mascara stopped running. On New Year's Eve, they stood on the same balcony, watching fireworks over the harbor. Tommy had conked out at 9:30 despite heroic efforts involving sparkling cider and noisemakers. Mark pulled Victoria close. "Any resolutions, Your Honor?" She smiled against his shoulder. "To keep breaking the right rules." He kissed her as midnight struck, snow falling soft and silent around them. In January, the Judicial Conduct Board quietly opened an inquiry. Someone had noticed her unusual interest in the Thompson case. Victoria faced it head-on, armed with a forensic report and an unblemished decade of service. The complaint was dismissed as unsubstantiated. She kept the letter in her desk drawer as a reminder. Some risks are worth the fall. By February, Tommy started calling her Vic without the judge prefix. By March, her toothbrush lived in their bathroom. By April, Mark got down on one knee in a hardware store, aisle 9, battery cables. Because that was where it had all come full circle. Tommy stood beside him holding a sign that read, "Say yes or the T-Rex gets it." Victoria said yes before he even finished the question. The wedding was set for following spring. Small backyard, dinosaur-shaped centerpieces insisted upon by the ring bearer. And every year after, on the anniversary of that rainy night, they drove to the exact spot on the Mystic River Parkway, stood in whatever weather the sky threw at them, and left a single toolbox on the shoulder, an anonymous gift for the next stranded soul. Because kindness, once given, has a way of coming home. Spring finally won its annual war against Boston winter, and the little backyard behind Mark's duplex looked like a determined 7-year-old had personally interrogated every flower into blooming. Tommy had been planning the proposal for 6 weeks. He had diagrams. He had color-coded sticky notes. He had bribed Mrs. Delgado with 2 weeks of taking out her trash, so she would keep the secret and babysit on the big night. He had even practiced his shocked face in the mirror so he could pretend he hadn't orchestrated the whole thing. The plan was flawless in the way only a second grader's plan can be. Mark, however, was a nervous wreck. He had the ring, simple white gold with a tiny diamond that caught the light the way Victoria's eyes did when she laughed at one of Tommy's terrible puns. He had rehearsed the words until they sounded robotic. He had reserved the back corner table at Legal Seafoods, the same place they'd had their third official date, when Tommy had ordered lobster and worn half of it as a hat. But Tommy had decided the restaurant was too boring for epic love and staged a coup. On the chosen Saturday, Victoria came home from court early, robe swapped for jeans and one of Mark's old flannels that smelled like sawdust and coffee. She found the living room transformed. Every lamp draped in Christmas lights, a blanket fort the size of a small car, and Tommy wearing a tuxedo t-shirt and a plastic crown. Emergency family meeting, he announced, hands on hips. Backyard. Now, bring Dad. Mark looked as confused as she felt. Buddy, we have reservations. Change of plans, Dad. This is bigger than lobster. Victoria raised an eyebrow, but let the small dictator lead her by the hand. The backyard was magic. Strings of bulbs zigzagged overhead. A path of construction paper dinosaurs led to a plywood platform Tommy had clearly sweet-talked the hardware store guys into cutting for him. On it sat 2 folding chairs, a card table covered in a red checker cloth, and a battery-powered lantern casting golden light. In the center of the table, a single red rose in a mason jar and a handwritten sign in purple marker, reserved for the best judge and the best dad. Also me, the best planner. Tommy shoved them both toward the chairs. Sit. Do not peek. I have to get the food. He disappeared inside, returning with a wobbly tray, grilled cheese sandwiches cut into hearts, dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, and 3 glasses of sparkling apple cider in plastic champagne flutes. Victoria's eyes were already glassy. Tommy, this is not done yet, he hissed, then dashed off again. Mark reached for her hand under the table, thumb tracing her knuckles. I swear I didn't put him up to this. I had a whole adult plan. I like his plan better, she whispered. Tommy returned carrying a small wooden box Mark recognized. He'd made it years ago for Sarah's jewelry, then packed it away after she died. Tommy climbed onto a stool he had positioned like a podium. He cleared his throat with theatrical gravity. Dear Judge Vic, he began, reading from a crumpled index card. You are very pretty, and you let me win at chess, sometimes even when I'm bad at it. You make Dad laugh the big laugh that crinkles his eyes. You have a magic hammer that makes bad guys go away. Also, you like dinosaur nuggets, which is scientific proof you are perfect. Victoria pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing outright. Tommy opened the box. Inside, nestled on a scrap of velvet, was the ring. Mark's heart stopped. Buddy, how did you? Mrs. Delgado's spare key is under the frog. Tommy whispered loudly. Focus, Dad. This is the big part. He handed the ring to Mark, then stepped back and gave an exaggerated thumbs up. Mark slid from his chair to one knee, the lantern light flickering across Victoria's stunned, tear-streaked face. Victoria Grace Hale, he started, voice cracking on the first try. He cleared his throat and tried again. I had a speech. It was good. It had metaphors about storms and shelter and second chances. But Tommy's right. This is bigger than words. He took her shaking hand. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed me when the whole world said I was guilty. You gave me back my son, my future, my heart. I don't have much, just a slightly chaotic 7-year-old, a toolbox, and a backyard full of dinosaur lights. But everything I have is yours. Will you marry us? Tommy bounced on his toes, barely containing himself. Victoria looked from Mark to Tommy and back again. Yes, she said, the word breaking in the middle. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Tommy let out a war whoop that probably woke half the neighborhood and launched himself at them both. They toppled into the grass in a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. Later, when the stars came out and Tommy finally passed out on the blanket fort couch, Mark and Victoria sat on the back steps, her head on his shoulder, ring glinting on her finger. You know, she murmured, I'm supposed to be the one who follows rules. Mark kissed her temple. Good thing you're excellent at breaking the right ones. Somewhere inside, Tommy dreamed of T-Rexes wearing tuxedos and carrying flower baskets. The wedding planning began the next morning at 6:03 a.m. with Tommy slamming a notebook on the kitchen table. Agenda item 1. He declared through a mouthful of cereal, the ring bearer gets to ride a dinosaur. A real one, or at least a very convincing costume. Victoria looked at Mark across the table, both of them bleary-eyed and stupidly happy. Motion carries, she said solemnly, tapping her coffee mug like a gavel. And just like that, the family of three began writing the next chapter, one dinosaur, one magic hammer, and one perfectly imperfect love at a time. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag part 8. The first year forever. They honeymooned for exactly 4 nights in a tiny cabin on Cape Cod, because Tommy declared that anything longer would be cruel and unusual punishment, and Mrs. Delgado refused to keep a bearded dragon named Judge Scales for more than 96 hours. Victoria, who had once taken solo vacations to legal conferences in windowless hotel ballrooms, spent those 4 days barefoot on the sand, watching Mark teach Tommy how to skip stones while gulls screamed overhead. On the 3rd morning, she woke to find both of them gone from the cottage. She found them on the beach building a sand replica of the Suffolk County Courthouse, complete with a matchbox car prisoner transport and a gummy worm defendant. Tommy looked up, hair full of salt and mischief. "Mom, you need to sentence the gummy worm to 5 years of tickle prison." She sentenced him to life with no parole and tackled them both into the surf. Back in Boston, real life settled in like a favorite old song. Victoria kept her chambers in her robe, but she came home every night to a 7-year-old who greeted her with a daily case report. Monday, Dad tried to make broccoli tasty. Verdict, still gross. Tuesday, I lost a tooth and the tooth fairy left me a note in your handwriting, suspicious. Wednesday, Judge Scales escaped and was found in the laundry basket judging socks. Mark got promoted to store manager, which meant better insurance and the ability to shut the place down early on Fridays, so the three of them could have movie nights with too much popcorn and a blanket fort that grew more elaborate every week. They turned the spare bedroom into an office for Victoria and a dino lair for Tommy. Half the room had law books and a sleek desk. The other half had glow-in-the-dark stars, a plastic T-Rex skeleton, and a cardboard gavel the size of a baseball bat. Some nights Victoria came home late from a tough sentencing. She'd stand in the doorway watching Mark read to Tommy, voices for every character, ridiculous and perfect, and the day's weight would slide off her shoulders like rain off an umbrella. Some nights Mark worked inventory until midnight and came home to find Victoria asleep on the couch in one of his flannels, case files scattered like fallen leaves, Tommy curled against her like a comma. He'd carry the boy to bed, then lift Victoria. She always pretended to be asleep so he would, and tuck her in, kissing the worry line between her brows until it smoothed away. They fought exactly twice that first year. The first time was over whether Tommy could have a real bearded dragon, Victoria. Sanitation concerns, Mark. But look at his little face. Tommy. I already named him Justice Scalier. They compromised on a weekend trial period. Justice Scalier now has his own judge's robe made from an old dish towel. The second fight was uglier. Victoria took a high-profile corruption case that kept her at the courthouse until 2 a.m. for weeks. Mark missed her. Tommy acted out at school, and one night Mark snapped, "We're not just a pit stop between trials, Vic." She came home the next evening, canceled court for 2 days, something judges simply do not do, and spent 48 hours in pajamas building the most elaborate blanket fort in Greater Boston history. They ate dinosaur nuggets by flashlight and apologized in whispers while Tommy slept between them. The next week, she hired a junior clerk to handle overflow and never missed another Friday movie night. On the first anniversary of the rainy night, they returned to the exact spot on the Mystic River Parkway. It was pouring again, of course it was. They left the car running with the hazards on, stood in the downpour in raincoats, and opened the truck's toolbox. Inside, a brand new set of metric wrenches, a note that read "Pay it forward," and a laminated photo of the three of them at the wedding, Tommy mid-hop. Victoria laughing, Mark looking at her like she'd hung the moon. They kissed in the rain until the state trooper, who pulled up to check on them, started clapping. That Christmas, Victoria hung her robe on the back of the bedroom door and found a tiny addition someone had sewn on the hem, a miniature T-Rex holding a gavel, embroidered in green thread. Tommy denied everything with chocolate on his face. In March, Victor Hale was sentenced to 6 years. Victoria recused herself from the case. No conflict this time, just principle. She watched from the gallery as the gavel fell on the man who had almost destroyed her family. Afterward, in the hallway, Mark simply took her hand and squeezed once. No words needed. Spring brought Tommy's 8th birthday. He asked for only one thing, for all three of them to get matching tattoos. They compromised again, Temporary dinosaurs that lasted 6 weeks and made the school principal weep with laughter at pickup. One night in May, Victoria came home to find the living room dark, except for the glow of the blanket fort. Inside, Mark and Tommy had set up a candlelight dinner of mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, gourmet, obviously. A construction paper banner read, "Happy we're a family day." 1 year since Mom said yes. Tommy had drawn stick figures of the three of them holding hands under a rainbow made of actual Skittles glued to the paper. Victoria cried into her macaroni. Mark kissed the tears away. Tommy rolled his eyes, so hard he nearly fell over. Later, after stories and goodnight kisses, Mark and Victoria stood on the balcony watching the city lights. 1 year ago, he said quietly, "I thought my story ended in a prison cell." She leaned back against him, his arms around her waist. "And I thought mine ended behind a bench, alone." He rested his chin on her head. Turns out the best verdicts aren't written in law books. She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. Objection sustained. Somewhere inside, Justice Scalier judged a sock for crimes against fashion. An 8-year-old slept the sleep of the absolutely certain that tomorrow would be even better than today. Because sometimes the universe writes itself with rain, a loose battery cable, and a little boy who believes in magic hammers. Hashtag part 9. The magic hammer, 5 years later. The Mystic River Parkway still curves the same way, but now there's a small wooden sign bolted to a guardrail at mile marker 14.2. It's hand-painted in purple and green, slightly crooked because an 8-year-old insisted on doing it himself. In this spot, a dad fixed a car. A judge found justice. A kid got MOM. Kindness wins. The Thompson-Hale family. Every year on the anniversary, strangers find a brand new toolbox sitting beneath the sign, a laminated note inside that reads, "Pay it forward. Someone once did it for us." Victoria Thompson-Hale is 50 now, silver threading her dark hair like deliberate highlights. She still wears a black robe 5 days a week, but the robe now has a tiny T-Rex pin on the collar that no one dares question. She is Chief Justice of the Superior Court, appointed after the old chief retired and whispered, "You're the only one crazy enough to make the system work for people instead of against them." Mark is 51, owns 3 hardware stores, and still keeps a full emergency toolkit in every vehicle, including the minivan that replaced a battered pickup. His hands are more scarred now, but they're the hands that can still fix anything. Broken carburetors, broken hearts, broken bicycles at 10 p.m. at night before a birthday. Tommy is 13, lanky and loud, and convinced he's going to be the first paleontologist lawyer in history. He still calls Victoria Mom and Mark Dad, but he has added "Your Honor" when he's trying to get out of chores. It never works. They live in a crooked blue house with a backyard big enough for a regulation treehouse courthouse, complete with a real gavel Tommy stole from eBay. Justice Scalier III, grandson of the original, presides over the laundry basket from a 40-gallon terrarium that takes up half the dining room. On the 10th anniversary of the rainy night, they throw a block party. Half the neighborhood shows up, plus Elena Vasquez, now a federal judge, Mrs. Delgado, 83 and still doing the electric slide, and the state trooper who once clapped at them kissing the rain. He brings his own kids now. There's a bounce house shaped like a courthouse. There's a cake with fondant dinosaurs wearing judicial robes. There's a playlist that starts with "Here Comes a Judge" and ends with the Jurassic Park theme. At dusk, Victoria climbs onto a picnic table and taps a plastic cup with a spoon. The crowd quiets, even the teenagers. 13 years ago, she begins, voice steady but thick, I was stranded, terrified, and convinced the world had forgotten how to be kind. One man climbed out of a beat-up truck in the middle of the storm and reminded me it hadn't. That man gave me back my faith in humanity. Then he gave me a family. And somehow, this magnificent, chaotic, dinosaur-obsessed child gave us both a future we never dared to dream. She looks at Tommy, who is pretending not to cry by aggressively hugging the current Justice Scalier. Kindness is a footnote, she says. It's the whole damn story. Mark steps up beside her, slips an arm around her waist. 10 years ago, he adds, I thought my life ended with a gavel. Turns out it started with one. Tommy can't stand it anymore. He vaults onto the table, nearly toppling all three of them, and yells into the microphone he definitely wasn't supposed to have. And I was right. I told you the magic hammer lady was the one. I'm basically a professional matchmaker. You're all welcome. The block erupts in laughter and applause. Later, when the lanterns are glowing, the kids are hunting fireflies. Mark and Victoria slip away to the front porch. Tommy is inside teaching a group of awestruck 10-year-olds how to moonwalk. Mark pulls Victoria close. "Still glad you stopped that night?" she asks softly. He kisses her, slow and certain. The way is every day for a decade, every single second. Behind them, the crooked purple sign catches the porch light. Above them, the sky is clear, no rain in sight. But somewhere, someone is pulling over on a dark road, opening a toolbox left by strangers, reading a note that says, "Pay it forward." And the circle keeps turning. Because once upon a rainy night, a father stopped for a stranger. A judge chose mercy over rules. A little boy believed in magic hammers. And the world, quietly, stubbornly, beautifully, became a better place. The end.